All right, you know we don't like the CBC very much here, but what about trendy, cutting-edge hipster types like, say, Gavin McInnes? He's a legend, or so he tells me, and his new book is called How to Piss in Public, whatever that means. He joins us from, it's probably New York or somewhere like that. Where actually are you right now? I'm
in New York City. I've got Central Park right behind me.
Ah, interesting. I've got a cardboard sign behind me. Now, we should explain there's Canadian content in you. You're not just some foreigner, some American telling us what it's all about.
No, I spent most of my adult life in Montreal and Ottawa. I left there in '99, but moved there from England in '74. So I am Canadian. Well, I say us, and I spell theater wrong.
Well, I came to this country in 1987, so I've now spent half my life in Canada, but I'm from Britain. My first job when I arrived in Canada was at the CBC, so I've got a bit of experience. I have my problems with them. Why do you dislike the corporation so much?
It's so hard. I don't even know where to begin. I always hated them. I used to set my alarm to Peter Zowski when I was a young man just because I would get out of bed in a rage. It was like better than that thing. They'd have discussions like, why do we call it duct tape when it's duct tape? That was a real topic on CBC Morning with Peter Zowski. But most recently, I did an interview there because I had a show in Ottawa, and I met two people out of the four that I worked with there, dealt with, that didn't have cell phones. And I said, the way I found out is I said, just text me the address because I'm driving. And she says, well, I don't have a cell phone. I go, well, how can you not have a cell phone? You're in media, you Luddite. And she says, well, I don't think I need one. And I said, well, you need one now. I just asked you to text me the address. And without irony, she said, no, I'll just find someone here who has a cell phone, and I'll get them to text you. So apparently you do need one.
Well, remember...
then when I got there, they didn't know who Dove Charney was. I mean, the average farmer doesn't have to know who he is, but if you're in media, you should know the head of American Apparel.
Yeah. You've got to remember, though, one cell phone like this kills 1 million African people. You know, the carbon footprint is destroying the planet. That's probably why. Yeah, Peter Zowski, there are younger people who probably wouldn't even have heard of Peter Zowski, but I was on his show. When I came to Canada, I was thought to be a right-on, left-of-centre literary biographer. Little did they know. So I used to be on his show, and then he realized that my politics were not his. And this man, who's thought of as being cuddly and lovable, he really did have a blacklist, a no-fly list, people who could not appear on the show. And if whatever you were talking about, I remember I had a biography of H.G. Wells, you know, boring and boring, boring, but it was internationally praised. I was giving interviews all over the world. He wouldn't have me on his show, not because of what I said about H.G. Wells, but because I wasn't as right-on as him on various political issues.
That sums up the CBC. This is what happens when there's no free market involved. It's absolute power, and it corrupts absolutely. So they make their own rules, and they have their own little ivory tower, where I was being interviewed once by them here in New York, but it was for CBC Radio nationally, and it was about hipsters and the commodification of hipster culture and how all these hipster kids are brainwashed by big business. They're always crapping on entrepreneurs, which drives me nuts. But they said, I dared to point out, I go, isn't it kind of strange that we're sitting here in the taxpayer trough, eating away, and criticizing entrepreneurs trying to make money? And she said, the trough? And I said, yeah, I mean, it's illegal for people not to pay your salary. If you don't pay tax, you go to jail. So by law, they have to pay for your business, your office, and you're sitting here crapping on people who make money out of nothing. And that whole interview mysteriously vanished. It was cut short. They went on a repeat. And I tried to get a reason why, and they kept saying they're delaying. And that's the old Canadian CBC trick.
Oh, yeah.
Of just boring you to death with attrition. So they never technically said it was banned, but they banned it.
You know, I hadn't heard that story before, but I mean, I could go on for ages about this, but I did an interview on CBC Radio years ago about my religious faith. And well, as I left, the guy in the control room, engineer, said, oh, that was really good. That was really... Anyway, it didn't air. Finally called the producer, and I said, is it going to air? And she said, I don't think it is. They thought you sounded too reasonable.
That's awesome. Yeah, I could tell stories for days about their sort of reverse McCarthyism, where if you don't fit the lefty mold, you cease to be. The most egregious example I can think of was for Stephen Harper's election back in, I don't know, '04 or whenever it was. I was on there with a bunch of, they had a bar setting. You couldn't drink, obviously, so we're all drinking water at this cool bar setting. And there's Kenny Hotz and some gay Olympic swimmer and a bunch of different guys and sort of icons, and I represented the hipsters. And I dared, just for the sake of discussion, to bring up some opposing views. Everyone was saying the exact same thing. Yeah. And we brought up Quebec, and I said, if you had a teenager living in your basement for 400 years and you kept threatening to move out, you'd say, go, move out. And then we discussed gay marriage, and I said, why? Not even all gays want to get married. Just a few lesbians and maybe 1% of gays. So a handful of people are dictating entire elections. Why does it matter? And so they cut me out of the whole thing. But that gay Olympic guy at the end, who was French-Canadian, just loses it on me because he's never heard anyone say anything other than the liberal narrative on CBC. And he says, we are in Canada, okay? Do you understand? This is not America. It matters. Everyone matters. We are multicultural and we include everyone. So the gays that want the marriage, they matter too. And Quebec matters, and blah, blah, blah. But the hilarious part was they had edited me out of the entire thing. So at the end, you just see this lunatic pointing to some random person who's not there, screaming about what defines Canada. And the irony was that's exactly what defines the CBC, or the CBC version of Canada, which is an invisible person that's been carefully Stalin-esque out of the equation. They're Stalinists.
It's anti-intellectual. It's very mediocre. It's never grasped genuine comedy the way, say, even the BBC has. So what we're being given is stuff which is, it's generally not terrible, but it's in the middle. And that's okay, but we're paying for it. In the middle, we watch or we don't watch. But in the middle, and we have to pay for the thing, that's what I object to. So I assume with your new book, and you're a major player in the States, for goodness sake, but with your new book, are you being interviewed by every second CBC show on radio and TV, or are they ostracizing you?
Well, some of them didn't get the dictum and don't know that I'm banned. Like George Floppanopoulos was interested in having me on, and then he got the secret slip saying no. But the Ottawa CBC hadn't heard. But I just decided the other day, I'm never doing an interview with them again. It was disingenuous of me to ever do an interview with them, and I regret that. But I'm boycotting them. I hate them. In fact, I'm here today because I see you guys as the anti-CBC.
Well, I think, well, look, I've known George for years, and he's not a bad guy. But the thing about George is, when you're in your mid-40s and you pretend to be a brave 25-year-old, and you won't touch any issue that's outside of the very small purview of safe liberals around the CBC, I think it's time to move on. But never time to move on with you. Your book's terrific, and so you will have you back. Thanks very much indeed.
Cheers. Thanks a lot.